Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And welcome back to the program. Thank you so much. On this Johnny Cash Friday, Congressman Bruce Westerman won on Tuesday in the primary. He had a primary opponent. He got 79.89% of the vote. And so now he moves on. He gets the nomination for the Republican Party, and Bruce Westerman joins us now. He's on the phone. Congratulations, Congressman.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be with you this morning on your Johnny Cash Friday. I always enjoy that.
It is always a good one, yeah. And this is one of my favorite ones just because it really does take a lighthearted approach to how, we could make these political discussions super serious, but it's pretty funny how a whole band
takes
can
a little bit of mental gymnastics to follow the storyline.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I love how even back in in Johnny Cash's day, you have that one guy who just burns his driver's license. He's like, I don't want to be tracked. I don't need this. I don't need to stop at a red light. That's just the government trying to tell me to stop my car.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Big Brother's always been there, I guess.
Yeah, it really has. All right, so Congressman Westerman, since you've been in office in D.C., you've sponsored or co-sponsored 17 bills which have been signed into law, more than 80 bills which have passed the House. You got any favorites out of that resume?
Well, obviously the Resilient Federal Forest Act was probably the biggest bill that I've personally sponsored. That the most contentious one that got the most notoriety, I guess you'd say. I've passed that out of the House twice, and we've been able to get bits and pieces of that into different pieces of legislation. So there's a good difference being made out there. But when you look at the tax cut bill, and there's a lot of good things that we've been able to do in Congress, especially with this new administration, in getting bills signed into law. And this week was actually a big week where we had the changes to the Dodd-Frank bill that the President signed yesterday. This is something that we passed in the House months ago. We called it the Financial Choice Act. And there were regulations put in place under the Obama administration that were just playing havoc with community banks and small financial institutions. We were seeing them close one after the other all across the country, and Arkansas is no exemption. And these community banks play a vital role, especially in rural America. And the Obama administration had put the same heavy-handed regulatory burden on community banks that the Wall Street banks were facing. This stemmed from the financial crisis that was caused by the Wall Street banks, that the community banks had no part in, but boy, they were paying the price for it. And who ultimately pays the price for regulations like that are small businesses and consumers, who are the backbone of the economy. So I was very pleased to see us pass the bill out of the House that the Senate sent back and get that on the President's desk, get signed into law.
Yeah, that is
also,
that is good. The 90%. So I've got something in front of me that says the passage of the Dodd-Frank reform. 90% of the bill passed this week. So 90% of it. So do you know what the other 10% is that you guys hope to do in the future?
Yeah, and I think what that means is that of the bill that we passed out of the House, called the Financial Choice Act, which was, I think, more of the standard for what the legislation should have been, only 90%, or maybe I should say 90% of that was able to get through the Senate. And a lot of it was on the way that we provided off-ramps out of these regulatory burdens in the House. We had a pretty rapid off-ramp where the Senate had a more gradual off-ramp. We did some things like we eliminated the CFPB in the House version. The Senate just put some restraints on the CFPB. So our bill was much more aggressive, and but at the end of the day, somebody went through it and decided that about 90% of what we had in the House version made it through on the Senate version.
Okay.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Yes. It feels like a Monday to everybody out there, or for most people out there, I would imagine. It certainly feels like a Monday for me, but it is Tuesday after Memorial Day. I hope everybody had a great weekend, a great long weekend. I hope you did a little grilling, at least just a little bit. I mean, you didn't do any, Joe. I did. I think I cooked out all three days. So had a really good time doing that. Did some ribs on Sunday night. It was kind of a flight of ribs, 3 racks of spare ribs. And I cut them St. Louis style. And I did one in a traditional type rub with some vinegar and your traditional barbecue. When you think of barbecue spices, that sort of thing, chili powder, paprika. And it was it really turned out good. And then I did another rack, which was just some Cavenders, which is a Greek seasoning, really, really good. And then I did another rack that was, you got to pat the ribs dry. Then you put some olive oil on it, sea salt, cracked black pepper, and let that sit. And then in the middle of the cook, you go out. This was more of a wet rub. You took some of that. I tried some of this Sweet Baby Ray's mustard sauce, okay, and I combined that with Kraft Original barbecue sauce, which is one of the most underrated sauces out there, just Kraft Original. And you combine those two, basically equal portions, and then in the middle of the cook, because I cooked about 4.5 hours over a pecan wood fire. They were really, really good. Anyway, that's kind of what I love to do. It's a hobby of mine. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. And, of course, you don't celebrate Memorial Day because, it's not barbecue day. Even though May is National Barbecue Month, I will remind you. But, no, you celebrate Memorial Day for those who gave the last full measure of devotion, the ultimate sacrifice, those who died to secure this country in service of this country. And I was just kind of contrasting the two ideas, the different ideas of Memorial Day and Independence Day. And I was just thinking about how, Independence Day, the 4th of July, that's where we celebrate the idea of America. And Memorial Day is where we celebrate those who died for the idea or the ideas behind America. And it's certainly an interesting reflection when you do that. Does anybody ever ask themselves, how many of us today versus previous generations ask ourselves, what is worth dying for? Think about that for a second. What is worth risking your life because of an idea? I mean, you certainly think of the gospel, okay. But it's certainly a healthy exercise to try to think about those things and what you believe. Speaking of the idea of America, later on in the program, I want to explore the concept of the freedom of speech. I want to talk a little bit more about Courtney Goodson saying in court, or her attorney saying in court when she got those ads pulled in the middle of the race, that you don't have a right to lie. There's a fantastic editorial in the Democrat Gazette that says, actually, according to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, Arkansas Supreme Court Justice, according to the United States Supreme Court, it is protected speech to be able to lie. It's kind of frightening when you have somebody saying that you don't have a right to lie. It makes me kind of not want that person in the courtroom again. I mean, that was my first thought. Like, you have to have protected speech, and there's clear case law demonstrating. And this editorial goes. This editorial goes a long way in demonstrating that yes, you have to protect somebody's speech from government interference. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want to compare that. I want to compare that editorial and this Arkansas Supreme Court race that's heading to a runoff with David Sterling and Justice Courtney Goodson. I want to compare it to what is happening over in Britain with Tommy Robinson. We'll do that today on the program. But I want to start here. On Friday, we told you about the Arkansas Razorbacks, I guess, putting out their stipulations for what it's going to take, theirs and the SEC's, for what it's going to take to get them to play in Little Rock, in War Memorial Stadium. What do we do with War Memorial Stadium? That's what people want to know. There was a bill 2 years ago, or not 2 years ago, but in 2017 there was a bill to transfer War Memorial Stadium from, I think, this department to that department. You got to find funding for it, and the governor went out on the 50-yard line and had a ceremony where he signed the bill, kind of, I guess, saving War Memorial Stadium. And then there was a feasibility study that was conducted, or is still being conducted. I'm not really sure as to whether or not the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, the Trojans, need to have a football team, and would that somehow support, now think about that, support War Memorial Stadium to where it's not just a giant money pit. But now we find out that the Arkansas Razorbacks are willing to play a few games a year, one game every other year, for $17 million. So if we can just come up with $17 million to remodel War Memorial Stadium, to give the stadium the proper upgrades for $17 million, well, it could come. The article said it could cost anywhere between $4, $10, or $17 million, if memory serves correct. We reported to you on this on Friday. And so I got some text messages during that segment. And listen, I know there are people, in the central Arkansas area that really enjoy, and I said this on Friday, and have amazing memories of the Razorbacks playing in War Memorial Stadium, and there's been some, incredible victories there and everything else. And I totally understand that. I'm approaching this from a fiscal standpoint, and I just don't think it makes any sense to spend this money. I don't understand why you would ever do it. Well, so after this segment, I looked at my cell phone, and I had some people who were listening to the Central Arkansas area that clearly knew a lot more about this than I did, and they were telling me, they said, Paul, what this really is a backdoor way to give UALR a football program and have a stadium upgrade. I mean, because, see, I had speculated that maybe putting the price at $17 million might be a show of good faith by the University of Arkansas. That we want to play, but knowing that they're never actually ever going to be able to secure the funds. They're never actually going to be able to get that $17 million for a football stadium so that the Razorbacks can play every other year down there, right? So, I think that still might be a possibility here. But you have Central Arkansas folks that tell me, no, listen, this is a way to go ahead and say, to use the carrot. Oh, you know what? To use the Trojan horse. That the idea of the Razorbacks playing in War Memorial Stadium, pun intended, is actually a Trojan horse to give UALR a football stadium that's updated for them to play in. Now, don't you think that's pretty much what's going on here? Because I do. Use a little carrot, and the carrot's we're going to do this so we can have the Razorbacks in Little Rock every other year for one game. And it only costs us $17 million, but it's for the Razorbacks, and so we'll do it because we want to go see the Razorbacks play in Little Rock because it's just a thing, and it's for Central Arkansas. Never mind those Northwest Arkansas types. This is for Central Arkansas. And it's our team, too. That's what they say. So, we've just got to do it. But what if maybe that explains it. It could be anywhere from $4 million to $10 million to $17 million. Well, what if the Razorbacks are saying it's got to be $17 million, you got to do all these, but they only do $4 or $10 million worth, and then the Razorbacks, well, sorry, you didn't meet our qualifications or our standards, but you've already spent $10 million. The Razorbacks don't come, and now we're going to start up a UALR football program. I don't understand why we would think that football is going to somehow save, or be a huge thing for the economy here in Arkansas. There's really only one thing that would produce a big economic boom in Arkansas for football, but that's for another discussion. Let me see here. Listen to this John Brummett piece, because this is what he wrote. The headline here, sure, football will fix it. And so Brummett is pretty skeptical, but of course, Brummett is a big liberal, so remember that. I do have to tip my hat to John Brummett here, because he does crack a pretty good joke here, where he writes, while Rex Nelson writes columns offering meaty substance on Little Rock's perilous flirtation with stagnation, there are those in the city, Mayor Mark Stodola and such, including Governor Asa Hutchinson, who lives here temporarily, who seem to be saying intercollegiate football is the magic bullet. The governor expresses great satisfaction that the 4-8 Razorbacks from Fayetteville have now agreed they will deign to play one game every other year in Little Rock's antiquated War Memorial Stadium, now propped up as a state park, along with a practice session every other spring. Ace acknowledges that the 4-8 Razorbacks insist in exchange on the expenditure of a significant sum of money by 2019 to make this 1950s palace less substandard, but he says taxpayers can be hit up easily enough, or presumably we would incur publicly underwritten debt. Because that is one thing. Yeah, Ace has said that we could use bonds. We could go into debt. Now listen to what Brummett says. Quote, man, oh man, these fiscal conservatives really like college football, don't they? Well, it's not the only principles that we violate if it's something that we really have to have. Insurance companies getting millions, billions of dollars because, there's a campaign contributions. You would imagine so. That's very tempting. Yeah, we're not so fiscal conservative. When it comes to football, fiscal conservatism out the window. When it comes to getting campaign contributions from billions of dollars and, hospitals and CEOs and Medicaid money going, being a consultant, I don't really care about smaller government and less people on welfare. It's not as big. I mean, maybe in campaign mode, but it's not as big of a deal when dollars and cents are actually involved. I'm just saying, let's not pretend that. Of course, anybody that has standards is a hypocrite at some point in their lives, because we're all imperfect people. But let's just not pretend that this is the only thing where we're not fiscally conservative. Now listen to what Brummett says, though, from a liberal standpoint. He says, if we'd throw a few more tens of thousands of poor people off Medicaid, maybe we could put a dome over War Memorial and lure a couple of 6-6 mid-major teams for a dicamba bowl or a meth bowl. It's the Monsanto dicamba bowl. Yay! I like it. Yeah, well, that's a very good point Joe makes. He does have a point. If we reduce the Medicaid rolls, we would have more money. See, John Brummett knows what the key driver of spending is in this state. I mean, that's what John Brummett is saying here. He knows what the key driving of spending is. And what would be a key savings of money, by the way. Although, I mean, he obviously agrees with the welfare program for able-to-work adults with no dependents. So, what do you guys think about this whole situation? I'm curious. I would love to know what you think. Do you think that this is a way to get UALR a good football stadium? I mean, down here, let's see, we have Brummett kind of slamming what the situation would be. he writes that the Razorbacks demonstrate annually that Arkansas is an infertile football recruiting base. In the next paragraph, he says, I fail to see how UALR's losing to Delta State by 53-6 in War Memorial in front of 700 fans would lift Little Rock. He has a point. Is it a Trojan horse? Is the carrot, hey, the Razorbacks will play here every other year if you spend $17 million. What if they only spend $4 million? What if they only spend $10 million? And then the Razorbacks say, you didn't meet it by your 2019 deadline, and now you have the UALR Trojans with a renovated football stadium or partially renovated, and now we can justify starting a football program there, which I don't think you can justify it, but you get my point. Let me know what you think. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. Keep in mind, I'm not a sports commentator. I do like sports. I do watch sports, but we don't really get into this very much. But when we're talking about taxpayer dollars, this is now something I think we need to discuss. This is Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.
Order. In the name of public safety, order. This meeting of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards is called to order in the name of public safety. What's on the agenda for the day?
We have before us today, per our summons, a representative from the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing cosmetology, cosmetologist, and all things hair care and beauty.
Right. Of course, I remember this. In the name of public safety, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and thank you for appearing before us today.
Yes, my name is Cosmo Glamour Gazette, and I'm here in response to a letter our state board received claiming we're in violation of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards. In the letter, you claim that our licensing board is in violation of your rules and regulations because we have failed to, quote, pay tribute, end quote, and therefore have not been granted a license by the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing licensing boards to, quote, shake down the Arkansans who have an interest in cosmetology, end quote.
In the name of public safety, order. Yes, Miss Gazette, we sent you that letter because you have not obtained our approval in the form of a license from our board to distribute licenses to the professional class your board strives to protect. In the name of public safety, of course.
Of course.
So, in the name of public safety, and just so we can get this for the record, you do admit and agree with our board, the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards, that you have not obtained a license, thereby revealing your board of cosmetology to be operating outside our rules, regulations, and authority?
Well, sir, I'm not sure our board agrees that we need a license from your board to continue to shake down, to look out for the public safety of Arkansans.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Well, it seems we are at a bit of an impasse if we are not in agreement that your board owes us tribute.
Sir, maybe we could ask and see if there's a bureaucrat in the house.
Ah, yes. Yes, that would shed some light on things. A bureaucrat. Yeah, in the name of public safety, is there a bureaucrat in the House? We need someone to resuscitate and confirm our authority as the Arkansas State Licensing Board, governing state licensing boards.
Here.
Ah, yes. Oh, good. Come to the end of the table in the name of public safety and state your name for the record, please.
Yes, I am Despot Ringleader, the head of the bureau governing all state bureaus, and it is my testimony the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards does have the authority to demand tribute in this situation and will provide in exchange a license to say they can continue to operate in the name of public safety.
It's hard to argue when the public safety is put at risk. Very well. We will consider Mrs. Ringleader's testimony as truth, and we will pay tribute in the name of public safety, of course.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So, you got a Washington County judge who is the same judge who's kind of making headlines a couple of weeks in a row here. Washington County judge ruling that a proposed marijuana farm can operate without the approval or the licensing of the quorum court. Interesting. This has to do with Native Flower, which is a nonprofit corporation, which is a phrase that should make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. If you say nonprofit, that should make you feel like, well, there's something different about them. They don't like profits. We're supposed to believe. Washington County Circuit Court Judge, this is Scarlett Sims reporting this. Washington County Circuit Judge Doug Martin decided in an April 4th summary judgment that 48 acres, 48 acres are zoned a particular way, but that growing marijuana falls under agricultural use, and therefore it's not under the purview of the Washington County Quorum Court, which has voted to deny a permit or a license, if you will, for the land use to cultivate marijuana. The area, Scarlett Sims reports, is rural, off Bush Road near Cane Hill and Lincoln. Last year, the nonprofit corporation Native Flower asked for a permit to grow marijuana, and the Washington County, listen to this, this is strange, this is interesting. The Washington County Planning Board approved it, but the Quorum Court denied it. So Washington County Planning Board said, go for it, grow the marijuana, but the Quorum Court said, no, don't grow the marijuana. Now, that's interesting. County attorney. Now, first of all, let me just remind you why this circuit judge is in the news. This is the same judge that took the Judicial Crisis Network ads off of the air in the middle of a campaign up in northwest Arkansas and did that, acted on that, and did not disclose or recuse himself because it was later found out that his wife works for Justice Courtney Goodson's husband, who is a lawyer, a trial lawyer. I mean, if you're not going to recuse yourself in the middle of an election, and again, this is all about speech and the freedom of it, and you're not going to recuse yourself. I think he later did, but I mean, you still stopped the ads from running without saying, hey, my wife gets money from your husband as an employee of your husband. I mean, that's a big deal. The question is, does that then, in the citizens' minds, should we question other rulings? This is just the reason why you have to be above reproach as a judge. that is a good. That's a good explanation. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. He is from District 4, just coming out of a massive primary win for him. Congressman, what else? Tell me about this. I saw this over on Fox News, the passage of a right to try for terminally ill patients. We're looking at the Fox News article right now. Tell us about this.
Yeah, and this was another big bill that goes to the president's desk. That all this happened on Tuesday. The day of the primary election, I was in D.C. voting for these bills, but we got the financial reforms and this Right to Try Act passed that allows terminally ill patients to use experimental drugs if they choose to do so. The FDA had put barriers up that would prevent people from trying these experimental drugs, but I think people deserve that right to try those drugs if the doctors have said there's nothing else we can do for you, but they know there's an experimental drug that hasn't made it through all the FDA trials yet.
Mm-hmm.
We gave patients that right to choose.
Wow. Did you guys have any pushback against that? I'm curious. Because you would think this is just a basic concept. I wish you could. I wish people had more freedom to try this kind of stuff before they were, given a death sentence. Personally, I would go even further with it. But did you have any pushback from people? Go ahead.
I had a lot of pushback from Nancy Pelosi and her friends on the other side of the aisle. Saying that allowing somebody to take a drug that the FDA hasn't determined the effects of it is cruel. Those kinds of arguments. But if your option is you're going to die, or you could possibly try this drug, I would want the right to try the drug.
Yeah, and here's the thing. With these days, in this time, there are so many resources out there for people to do their own research. I was watching a podcast the other day where they were saying, there's this clinic down in Panama where they're having these amazing successes with this certain type of stem cell, and of course they're ethical stem cells. They're not embryonic. They're but yet we've got regulations here that are preventing that treatment from being done, in the United States. But down there, they're having these incredible results. And so I guess my point is, there's all this information out there that people can get with the internet to kind of make their own decisions. And so, why not? And of course,
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Sure. Just keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen. The truth is the truth. It is what it is. And you can't, just because there are some people that don't want to believe it, or just because sometimes, just because there are not enough people that know what the truth is, that doesn't mean that it's not the truth. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality, trying to measurably reduce the size and scope of government while we build this liberty machine. We can't do it without you listening every single day, and we certainly appreciate it. And the audience, the growing audience, across the state of Arkansas, your commitment to liberty, giving more power back to the people, standing up for small business against these burdensome regulations and taxes, and what appears to be a government that is just constantly thirsty for more of our money after we're already giving them plenty of it to do these things. Our government officials trying to get very creative with new ways to tax us, and also get creative with slogans and language to try to convince us that our tax increases or more money going to the government will somehow be a tax cut. What is the definition of a tax cut, ladies and gentlemen? Help me here. The definition of a tax cut means less money going to the government than is currently going to the government from the people. A smaller amount of money. Right now, the government, it takes X to run the government. And so if it's a tax cut, the tax burden would be lightened. In order for the tax burden to be lightened, you have to have less money going to the government from the people.
That's not a tax cut.
What would you call that, Joe?
No. A tax cut is when you cut the taxes on one thing and then supplement it somewhere else.
You mean raise them somewhere else? That's what you think a tax cut is.
Oh, no. That's not a tax cut either.
Oh, what is that?
That's called a net neutral tax.
Oh, yeah. Revenue neutral.
Revenue neutral tax.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not a tax cut.
So
what you're proposing is not a tax cut. What I'm proposing is a tax cut.
Well, you're defining it. You would say, well, we have different definitions of what a tax cut is. Is that what you're saying?
I guess we are disagreeing on words and phrases.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the problem. That is a fundamental problem that the Marble Palace has right now, and that Little Rock has to figure out. The people down there.
I think you need to figure it out, Paul.
Well, maybe. But my definition is the traditional conservative definition. And their definition is one that preserves the growth of government.
Some would agree with you on that statement.
Yeah, I know. But this is the thing.
One of them.
This is an educational outreach because we want to be able to accurately clarify exactly what they do and exactly what they don't do. And you guys listening out there, as we're trying to teach, and I'm trying to expose the truth about what's going on and get away from just the political rhetoric that they tell us. You guys have a huge opportunity as well to talk about this. I mean, everybody out there, whether you are, you lean left or not, you don't like giving your money up to the government. You especially don't like giving up your money to the government when they want to spend $17 million on War Memorial Stadium with the hope that maybe the Razorbacks will play there every other year. People get upset when you start talking about this. So they'll also get upset if you just, tell them, hey, do you realize that it takes almost $8,000 a person to run our government, but it takes, $4,000 to run on average the other states around us per person? What's going on? Why can't we have a government like that? Why do we need to have, even be considering an increase in taxes on churches? Why were we even considering increasing the taxes on groceries and making a sales tax progressive? Which, by the way, that's why John Brummett, I figured it out. The reason John Brummett, who used to be for the grocery tax decrease for everybody when Mike Beebe was trying to do it, and all of a sudden he was supporting the Republican plan to increase the grocery taxes on middle income and rich people, but provide a welfare program or earned income tax credit for poor people, is because John Brummett believes in the progressive income tax to such a degree other liberals like him also believe and would love to have a progressive sales tax. And that is a cliff that is just devastating when you look on. I mean, can you imagine if they applied it to more things than groceries? If you paid your sales tax and it was different based on how much money you made, just like the progressive income tax, that's a liberal dream. Well, you're rich, so you have to pay a higher sales tax than someone who's poor. That's exactly what the liberals want. And our Republican-led legislative task force was seriously considering this and that's why it's because they hired Randall Bauer, who I'm now starting to believe was just fired to make it, is an appeasement situation to make it look like we're not using this guy anymore, but we really are. Randall Bauer was the big liberal that the Republicans hired, the lifelong Democrat that contributed to Democrats. Anyway, interesting stuff. The phone number, folks, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. So we're going to continue to educate on taxes here. There was an interesting op-ed in the Northeast Arkansas's newspaper, the Jonesboro Sun, where Conduit for Action was mentioned. Now, this is an article that is the title of this article was Tuesday's Primary Showed Off the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And they go through a few local county races in Craighead County, and they talk about how it was nice to see that you had, in these Republican primaries, you had people duking it out, and when it was over, the people were humble in their winning. They were humble in their defeat. They, whether it was their county circuit clerk, which was a tight race, whether it was the county judge seat and everything, where people were just, looking forward to working with the other person who had just beaten them. And that was what the gist of the article was until the editorial got to the primary for District 53 State House, State Representative Dan Sullivan versus Dr. Cole Peck. State Representative Sullivan winning his race. And they write this. Well, first of all, they quote Jeff Presley saying, "It was a clean race. I wish Marvin all the best, and I look forward to working on county-wide projects on emergency management with him." So Jeff Presley lost to now County Judge Marvin Day. And the Sun writes, "That's how candidates should respond in defeat. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for conservative Republican Cole Peck, who ran a nasty campaign against incumbent State Representative Dan Sullivan, Republican District 53. Conduit for Action, a far-right political action committee in Arkansas, pointed to Peck's outlandish tactics during the campaign," the Sun writes. "We thought we had already seen the most deceptive campaign mailer of the election, but as we get closer to May 22nd, they are getting worse." CFA posted on its website, "It's sad to see Dr. Cole Peck tarnish his reputation by allowing his campaign to put out false and misleading information about his opponent. Dr. Cole Peck's campaign is using smear tactics against Representative Dan Sullivan of House District 53, end quote. The website pointed out 5 deceptive or false statements in Peck's campaign mailers. When the Sun reported on one of Peck's false advertising claims in his last mailer days before the primary election, that Sullivan's former business, quote, is under investigation for Medicaid fraud, end quote, Peck admitted it was simply a mistake, that Sullivan's company was under investigation for Medicaid fraud. While Sullivan's company had been under investigation for its Medicaid billing that proved inaccurate and money had to be returned, there was never any evidence of fraud uncovered or mentioned by state regulators. Overbilling is a serious matter, they write, but it doesn't always necessarily involve fraud. It can happen all the time for a lot of different reasons, folks." The Sun goes on, "There's a big difference, especially when considering libel laws. Words have meaning, especially red flag words like fraud. Just because it's a campaign doesn't mean the rules of law don't apply. It's one thing to have an opinion. It's quite another to state something as fact, to damage to someone's reputation when it's not. Hopefully, if Peck decides to run for office again, he'll get better campaign advice, because lousy campaign strategy is probably what did the most damage to sink his bid against Sullivan." So let's stop right here, because I want to first of all thank the Jonesboro Sun for reporting the facts. Okay, days before this election, basically a lie, a mailer with a lie on it comes out in an attempt to deceive the people and win an election. Now, it was desperate attempts. I'm sure his polling wasn't good or whatever. The Jonesboro Sun, in the interest of its citizens, in the interest of getting the truth out there, which is what any newspaper or any news outlet is supposed to be charged with. Let's get the facts out there. Let the people make their own decisions, but let's report on what the facts are. They write an article debunking the mailer on the Sunday before the primary. Okay. So, here's the question, Courtney Goodson. Does Cole Peck have a right to put that mailer out? Does Cole Peck have a right to put the mailer out? Under freedom of speech. A right to lie, if you will. I'm going to talk more about this at 7. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. I would describe the maintenance of a free society, as Milton Friedman describes it. The maintenance of a free society is a very delicate thing. It requires the ability to put up with temporary evils. on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in and you try to do something about them, you not may make them worse, but you'll spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere. Okay? What a temporary evil in this situation is the fact that, yeah, people have the right to lie, and people can put out a mailer like Kolpeck did with an outright lie on it. But guess what? I mean, that's a temporary evil. Do we want the government coming in and saying what you can and can't say? Absolutely not. That's not America, right? But it's about an election. Yeah, I know. There's been plenty of elections that have been won or lost based on the same thing. It's a temporary evil, but in the sake of freedom for everybody else, we have to have kid gloves with this thing because this is the maintenance of our free society. But here we have a microcosm of how it's supposed to work. Here's a microcosm of how it's supposed to work. This newspaper, because they had a duty to the truth, and they were bound to the truth, they reported the facts, and I think the people of District 53 could see through it, and they were like, I'm voting. And a lot of people did make up their minds when they saw that the campaign was being proven as advancing falsehoods. A lot of people did make that up, or make their minds up when they found that out. So yeah, I think this. So here's the challenge. If what the Judicial Crisis Network is saying with their so-called dark money is not true, where is the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette? Where are they in writing their pieces on the things that are untrue about what is being said? Courtney Goodson goes to court and gets the ads pulled, okay? But where's the Democrat-Gazette? I'm saying in this situation, you got two different, one's a little microcosm of what the larger thing is. But in the district race of District 53, there were lies told, and the Sun exposed what those lies were, and the people there was no guarantee that people were going to elect Dan Sullivan by doing it, but they were obligated to the truth. And kudos to them. Where's the Democrat-Gazette if what is being said about Goodson and these same facts that went out back when she tried to run for the Chief Justice seat and lost, where's the Gazette correcting the record? And the question is, I think if there was egregious things that were outright lies, like the Kolpeck mailer, the Gazette would be all over it. And here's a little-known fact. If you go back to 2016, when Courtney Goodson was running for the Chief Justice seat, the Gazette was reporting on the very things that wound up in some of these Judicial Crisis Network ads and mailers. So I find that a little bit different. The reason the Gazette or other papers aren't necessarily saying these attack ads are untrue, the substance of them are inaccurate, is because they're not inaccurate. Because the other papers reported on some of these things long before the Judicial Crisis Network got involved and started educating the public about what somebody's record is. Two different, listen, it's two different issues, two different campaigns, but in one you can see how things worked out, I think, for the better. Whether or not, regardless of who had won in District 53, granted, I'm really happy Dan Sullivan won, but I'm just saying, if there's a falsehood out there, this is the job of the media. This is the job of the media. The job of the media is to put the facts out there, to put the truth out there, and then let the people do what they want to do. But that is the job of the media, to speak truth to power, to take a false campaign mailer and call it false, or say, well, they didn't even really call it false. They quoted Dan Sullivan as saying it was a lie, and guess what they did? All they did was they said, here's the Attorney General a letter saying not under investigation. Here is the Office of Medicaid Inspector General saying not under investigation, and go for, do what you want to. It's not a true statement what was on that mailer. And fraud is a specific legal term, by the way. Medicaid fraud is a specific accusation. So anyway, interesting stuff. Kudos again to the Jonesboro Sun. Really happy for that they did what they did. I thought it was a great, valuable service to the people of Northeast Arkansas, just getting the facts out there, letting the people decide. And again, if what is being said about Justice Courtney Goodson, if it is not true, you would think other print outlets would do the same thing the Jonesboro Sun did. If they, in fact, were false. I haven't seen that. Back in 2016, I did see Gazette stories with the same reporting that we see on mailers and Judicial Crisis Network ads now. We got to take a break. Don't go anywhere.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I notice I didn't say you have the right to lie and get away with it. I mean, there are other laws out there where, you can be pursued for your outright lies. But in terms of, the government restricting speech, the Constitution is clear and case law is clear. And I'm going to talk more about that coming up here at 7:05 because there is a great editorial about this particular concept, specifically with the Supreme Court races, the runoff between David Sterling and Justice Courtney Goodson, and these Judicial Crisis Network ads that really have liberals everywhere kind of melting down because of the dark money. It's the dark money, Be very, very, very afraid of it. People on the Facebook page talking about how, the truth is very important, and I had no idea how hard it was to find the truth in politics. Folks, it's not just an Arkansas thing. I think there appears to be a movement out there. I think there are more people becoming aware of the press and the... I don't even think it is. I think it goes beyond calling it the liberal media now, and we've called it that for a long time, or the mainstream media, or whatever. I feel like there are people that realize. I mean, let's just take it from a national standpoint, and the reporting. I mean, I saw a Washington Post story today about how Trump is a terrible president because he blew up the North Korean summit, and if you read the it's just absolute. It's absolute garbage. It's absolute rubbish. It is absolutely, the North Korea summit appears to be back on, folks. It appears to be back on. I mean, that article, it was an opinion piece in the Washington Post. It makes absolutely no sense. I was reading it this morning, and I thought, boy, this went to print right as the narrative shifted and everything changed again. I mean, and yet they're saying that it was all Donald Trump's fault, that he tried to move too quickly and everything else. And these guys are obviously, these people they have a disdain for him in how fast-moving Donald Trump is and what he's doing with geopolitics. You have people now starting to criticize Alec Baldwin's portrayal of Donald Trump. Old actual comedians, old SNL comedians like Norm Macdonald and Rob Schneider saying, listen, if it is obvious while you are portraying somebody, a caricature of somebody, if it's obvious that you personally hate that person, that if you're going to actually play someone as a caricature, you've actually got to kind of admire them in some way in order to make them funny, because Alec Baldwin's Donald Trump is the least funny president. He's not funny at all, and they've hit the nail on the head. The reason he's not funny is because you know personally Alec Baldwin despises. You had Daryl Hammond of SNL that actually did a great Donald Trump back in the 90s, and that was back when it was okay to before Donald Trump was political. So I really think this is going to get bigger. I think on the national level, and I hope it happens here in Arkansas locally, I think slowly in some circles, people's eyes are being opened to just how fake and just how controlled these media narratives are. And a lot of people don't understand how much the media cycle controls your thoughts, how much the media cycle controls, whether or not you have a good day or a bad day. Now, some of these anti-Trumps and stuff, the media will actually set their mood for the day, which is not healthy. And my hope is the more people wake up and they realize just how controlled it is, that they might start questioning other things. Like, well, if I can't, what else are you not telling me? And maybe, just maybe, they'll start to consider much bigger things like, well, If the media is lying, what if the world is lying? What else could be true? Maybe they'll ask the question, is everything in the Bible actually true? Wouldn't that be a great question to ask?
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
If you're terminally ill, you're not just going to go out and try any old drug, You're going to be like, okay, I think this is going to help me, and you're going to do the research. I think most people would say that's a reasonable expectation.
Right. Well, and there are snake oil salesmen out there too. So, that's one of the most atrocious things is somebody trying to take financial advantage of someone at a point like that in their life. But you're right as far as drugs that are experimental, that the bureaucracy in the FDA is unbelievable, and it takes years and years to get drugs through trials, and there's good and bad to that as well. But I've got a friend whose wife had a disease, and there were treatments for it, but couldn't be done here in the U.S., and he actually, as a last resort, took her to China to get treatment. And she did survive longer from those treatments, but she could have had the treatment here in the U.S. had it been approved by the FDA.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's good. I think that anytime we're allowing people more choice, so when it comes to their health care, is a good thing. And so this is a step in the right direction. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. And so, Congressman, what I want to know is, I was at the Craighead County Republican Lincoln Day dinner last Saturday, where your colleague, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, was in Arkansas. And
right.
Some people are saying that he is, he's the next Speaker of the House. There were reports this week, though, that, maybe there's some others being considered. Jim Jordan's name gets thrown around. So I guess I'm curious, well, what's the feeling? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I think Kevin would definitely be the front runner if the election were to happen right now, but there's a lot to take place before that election happens in November after the general election. The main thing I want to make sure of is that the next Speaker of the House isn't an old one named Nancy Pelosi. So that's priority number one, to make sure that we retain the majority, and she's not the new Speaker. But Kevin's the majority leader. He was in the Speaker's race briefly until Paul Ryan got pulled into it last time, and he backed out and has been a great supporter of Paul. He's from California, but he's from a part of California that I think we don't often realize is even in California anymore with most of the stuff that comes out of California. But he's from a rural area, from Bakersfield.
Yeah.
He tells me he's more redneck than most Arkansans are, and I give him a hard time about being a California surfer boy. But he's the furthest thing from that. But you got the streets of Bakersfield out there. Some pretty strong country music legends came out of Bakersfield as well.
Yeah. Oh wow, interesting.
And
yeah.
I think Roy Clark and wasn't Merle Haggard from Bakersfield?
Maybe. Yeah, some people want me to do Merle Haggard Mondays, and in addition to Johnny Cash Fridays. So tell me, Bruce, what do you think? You mentioned we got a Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw the recent video of her. And she keeps kind of, having these moments that are really troublesome. Not from regardless of a political standpoint of view, like just you're like, whoa, is something is she healthy? But this blue wave, okay, it's a blue wave. Blue wave's going to come, but then you got polling now in a generic ballot. They're now saying Republicans got a 6-point advantage now. That could change between now and November. What are the Republicans feeling? I mean, do you have any colleagues that have legitimate opposition that are worried?
Oh yeah, across the country, there's in all races you have to take them serious. You can't, especially when you're at the congressional level. I mean, these are big races with. I think a lot of people might get into congressional races not understanding the magnitude of what running one is like and what can happen through the course of one, the amount of just paperwork and administrative work that's involved in running a big campaign and the organization behind it. So anything can happen in one of these.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Who gets to decide what the truth is? Welcome to the program. This is hour number 2. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine, and we need your help. The phone number, call or text 870-275-9799. Thank you so much for listening to the program today. Who's going to determine what's the truth? Who is going to determine who is the arbiter of that? That is the question in this Arkansas Democrat Gazette opinion editorial. It is right in line. Excellent piece. Really, really glad that this is being put out there because the context has to do with Justice Courtney Goodson having ads that are stopped or pulled in the middle of an election campaign. She, of course, is moving on to the runoff election against Attorney David Sterling for this Associate Justice position. Now, it's interesting because it was quoted that she said, or somebody, maybe her attorneys or something said, you don't have a right to lie. That's very, very dangerous. And the Arkansas Supreme Court, well, who knows what they think about that, but the United States Supreme Court thinks differently. This op-ed, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, says the big news in the state's recent primary for Arkansas Supreme Court wasn't who did well enough to go on to the next round, but all the dark money that was spent tearing down a couple of candidates, including the incumbent Supreme Court Justice Courtney Goodson. All those ads on radio and TV implying that she was the only member of the top court to ask for a raise, her taking of certain gifts, were produced in the familiar campaign style. That is, ominous music played over the oh-so-concerned announcer, imploring that gentle voter call the justice, and why not call her at supper time too, the better to cause maximum bother. Courtney Goodson didn't take it without a fight, but instead of refuting the ad's claims, she went to court. Now think about that. That's a good, right? Yeah, it is a very lawyer thing to do. I mean, after all, these are a bunch of lawyers. Instead of refuting the ads, she goes to court. Her lawyers were able, as you'd be if you were representing a Supreme Court justice, but one of their arguments caught our eye, like a fishing lure. I mean, this was even sent to me, folks. I mean, it was sent to me when the first news came out, was reported, and people were just very upset by this concept. But like a fishing lure, according to the papers, Her Honor, or maybe just her people, said the ads from this shadowy judicial crisis network were lies and not protected by free speech. Interesting. That other Supreme Court, the one working out our nation's capital, has ruled several times in the last few years on lies, damned lies, and protected speech. They would not agree with Justice Courtney Goodson on this. First, there's the awful case
of the Phelps people. Everybody remember them? Who protested in the most uncivil way by waving around anti-gay posters at military funerals. Remember them? I mean, you know, people wanted to just, there were people that wanted to get in there, got into physical altercations. They'd be so mad because it's like, how could you do this? How could you basically just, you know, spit on the graves of these people when they're in mourning? There's no love in that. The court ruled in Snyder versus Phelps, though, that civil liability on unpopular speech is unconstitutional. In other words, unpopular speech is protected as free speech. Then you can look at Brown versus Entertainment Merchants Association. They write, the Gazette writes in this editorial, about violent video games. Also Reed versus the Town of Gilbert. That's about political signage. And even the old Stand by Hustler Magazine versus Falwell, about which a movie of some note was made. The courts have ruled on political speech before, and most times protected. Most times protected. What about lies, though? That question brings us to the United States versus Alvarez, an interesting one that would keep law students awake in class even at 8 a.m. Xavier Alvarez was a liar. The opinion in the case written by Justice Anthony Kennedy said so. Few disputed it. Mr. Alvarez was a member of a water district board in California, and he violated the Stolen Valor Law by claiming, among other things, he was a former Marine and was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1987. Why anyone would claim to earn the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1987 when the country wasn't at war is anybody's guess. But then this man also claimed to have been a member of the Detroit Red Wings. Why would you claim that? They can look that up. Exactly. Why would you claim that they can look it up, Joe? I know this guy's kind of, anyway, but this is the case. This is the case. Isn't history great? Those lies were eventually found out. The papers ridiculed him. Then prosecutors sicked the legal dogs on him. After all, he violated the Stolen Valor Law. So, in 2012, the nation's top court struck down the Stolen Valor Law. In his written opinion, Justice Kennedy rejected claims that lies are generally not protected speech under the First Amendment. He said, sure, defamation and fraud could be punished. Again, you have the right to lie. You don't have the right to, not get, sued for defamation or fraud, right? He said, sure, defamation and fraud can be punished, but the court, quote, listen, has never endorsed the categorical rule the government advances that false statements receive no First Amendment protection. Wow. And rejected the notion that false speech should be in a general category that is presumptively unprotected. For more detailed reading, the Gazette writes, you can see Erwin Kaminsky's commentary on the American Bar Association website. I'm not pronouncing that name right, but anyway. Also, according to the Truman Project, they write, to uphold the Stolen Valor Law would have set a dangerous precedent. Some had argued that because he used his lies to be elected to public office, they amounted to criminal fraud. But criminalizing lies on the campaign trail, tempting as it is, would give the government and thereby the incumbent party an enormous and unprecedented amount of power. Again, you have to think of it, we're not in a perfect system and we never will be, but you have to think of this concept of temporary evils and the maintenance of a free society. You have to allow the freedom for people to do things that you don't like or that are wrong or morally wrong or ethically wrong, but I'd rather have the freedom, wouldn't you? The Gazette goes on. Or, as the Atlantic put it, after the Alvarez ruling, there is no clear right to lie, but a lot of precedent and simple common sense suggest it's a bad idea to let government officials determine truth and threaten designated liars with jail. In fact, the existence of the law affects politics even if no one is ever prosecuted. Candidates can complain get a probable cause ruling, and then proclaim that an opponent or critic has lied. A lot of common sense. It's a bad idea to let government officials determine truth. Let me say that again. And this goes for all. It's a bad idea to let government officials determine truth. Wow, that's powerful stuff. We want to err on the side of a limited government. We want to err on the side of the people. And we want to err on the side of freedom. What an American idea that is. They go on, and maybe that's the point. Yelling fire in a movie theater when there is no fire is against the law, but are lies told during political campaigns? If so, who gets to decide what's the truth? The courts? Congress? Some government agency? The Gazette goes on, it'd be better if the U.S. Supreme Court kept along its path in this matter and allowed lies First Amendment protections. It would be better for we the people, because eventually Americans will figure out who's a liar. Maybe Judge Chris Piazza, a good man and normally a good judge, doesn't understand the Alvarez decision when he pulls the ads that Courtney Goodson wanted pulled. Hopefully, he will in the future. The best thing to do with a misleading campaign like the one the Judicial Crisis Network launched is to combat it with the truth. Okay, well, do that. Again, some of the ads that Judicial Crisis Network, some of the facts in the ads, folks, were first reported in 2016 by the Democrat Gazette. Let me say that again. Some of the things that you've heard on these Judicial Crisis Network ads were first reported in the Gazette. I mean, this is actually a mailer that I have saved. It was back in 2016 when they ran these ads the first time, and they quote the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. September 10th of 2015 reported that Justice Goodson took a $50,000 tour of Italy thanks to one W.H. Taylor, a business associate of her husband's. Exceptional improprieties tend to be not exceptional at all in Mrs. Justice Goodson's scandal-plagued career, but there's no underestimating her sheer nerve. September 10th, 2015, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette reported that. And that winds up in a Judicial Crisis Network ad? And people want to say, so they're partially right here. You want to combat it with the truth. Don't try to get the ads pulled. Don't try to say you don't have a right to lie. You do have a right to lie, but you can do something about it. And I said this last hour, Cole Peck put out false, misleading campaign material that was demonstrably false, proven so, and the newspaper up in Northeast Arkansas, the Jonesboro Sun, had an obligation to the truth once they were given that information, and they reported on it saying, no, there is no Medicaid fraud. The Attorney General says so. The Office of Medicaid Inspector General says so. Now, that's a microcosm of what should happen here. If you're actually putting out lies, your media has an obligation to the truth and is bound to the truth. And you put it out there and let the chips fall where they may. And that's what happened. Right? But if these Judicial Crisis Network ads are so false, where is the media with the proof that they're false? And the question, the real truth is, some of this Judicial Crisis Network dark money and the ads that they're producing, the facts come right from the statewide newspaper. And people are all upset about it. I don't get it. The Gazette goes on. You should combat it with the truth. Most voters in Arkansas found at last Courtney Goodson was targeted by all that dark money, but made the runoff. Other candidates did too. We hope in the runoff Justice Goodson will explain if she understands the U.S. Supreme Court's several decisions on free speech, and if so, if she agrees with them, and if she doesn't, if she will rule on future cases that lies are not protected as free speech by the First Amendment. Free speech is important nowadays, as in all days. But lately, it seems to be under attack and in the most unfortunate places, on college campuses. Wow. What a great point by the Gazette. Yeah, that's a nice pivot there, acknowledging that on college campuses, they are, coddling these children and yes. Yeah. They go on, we don't need it being under attack by Arkansas Supreme Court justices. The way to fight lies is not with court injunctions and restraining orders, but with more information. That is, with competing claims and assertions. The truth will emerge as we, the people, see it, not through the eyes of some government officials. Thank you, Arkansas Democrat Gazette editorial staff, whoever wrote that. I agree with, I agree with it. It's really, really good stuff. Yeah. And it's an article standing up for freedom, yeah, and the freedom of speech, even if it's unpopular or untrue. We've got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Okay, so I want to compare and contrast the value of our freedom of speech and being able to speak the truth, or not. But anyway, I want to compare that with what's going on across the pond. Tommy Robinson. I didn't really know who this guy was. I haven't followed this. But did you hear what happened to this guy named Tommy Robinson over in London? He's a critic of unrestricted Muslim immigration to his country. He's described as a right-wing activist. He was jailed because he was reporting on a case where they were trying several Muslim men for what's being called as child grooming. Grooming. Britain has been rocked by a series of child sex scandals perpetuated by gangs of predominantly Muslim men, Fox News reports. UK right-wing activist and journalist Tommy Robinson was arrested and reportedly jailed Friday after he filmed members of an alleged child grooming gang entering a court for trial. But the details of his purported sentence remain murky after the judge ordered the press, this is a power that the government has in Great Britain, after the judge ordered the press not to report on the case, to the point where, go over to the Breitbart article, because Breitbart has a London office. This is all they could report because Breitbart is governed by this. Breitbart London has a headline, redacted, arrested for, redacted, outside, redacted, Leeds Crown Court issues media ban. The Leeds Crown Court has issued a UK media ban following the arrest of well-known activist and citizen journalist redacted, outside redacted. The reporting restriction, which requires on all publications within the United Kingdom to cease any mention of the details of the arrest or court proceedings of redacted, was issued Friday afternoon. And they issue the media, the redaction, the court order here. This just kind of really, it sent chills. This guy was tried and convicted and sentenced in a very short amount of time. They're now putting Tommy Robinson away for 12 months. 12 or 13 months. They're saying it's a death sentence because he has been so outspoken against Muslim immigration and what it's done to his country that they're saying he's going to be killed in prison, that the judge was set. And so here's a guy who's just simply reporting out there on the street, and they arrest him. They try him. They said he was interrupting or disturbing the peace. 12 months in jail was his sentence. And then they say you can't talk about it because he's got a huge following over there. You talk about the freedom of speech. You talk about what other things are going. I mean, this is being compared to, they're now saying that London is essentially doing the same stuff that the Soviet Union used to do to people. They're saying that the police arrested him and put him in a van and drove him off, and then he was, boom. And to say the media can't report now somebody, when's the last time you've heard of media not being able to report on a conviction of anybody? He was convicted and sentenced. Now, not necessarily the arrest, but you can't report on the arrest. Okay, you can't report on the conviction. That's straight. You can't report on the sentencing. In what world does a press not get to report on the government putting somebody in jail? My goodness. I mean, there are members of the UKIP party over there that are trying to get some action on this, but they're saying that this guy may end up being murdered in prison. because he has been so outspoken. And what is that? Is it unpopular speech? Is being a critic in London by the government officials, is being a critic of Muslim immigration, if you're in London, is it by most public officials, is that considered unpopular speech? Yeah, absolutely it is. Because they're the ones setting immigration policy, and any criticism of the immigration policy is a criticism of them for the most part. The ones, in power. Anyway, we're going to take a break, folks. Big contrast between London and us, and we need to make sure it stays that way.
Racist, and you have to take it serious. But I don't think it's near as much of a big blue wave as the national media would like to portray it is. And that goes back, if you look at generic ballots at this time before the election in previous midterms, we're actually, as Republicans, in pretty good shape compared to what we've been in the past. I think you're going to see a lot of there's so much vitriol up there about the president that in certain areas you're going to see a lot of Democrats come out and vote. So I think the biggest threat to the Republican majority is just the base going out and voting. So we've got to do a good job of getting our base motivated and getting Republicans and independents that typically swing Republican to the polls.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are going to definitely come out in November because I think they're going to want to definitely, make a statement. I mean, if you look at what has happened, and during the primary, the Republican primary for president, I was skeptical of Donald Trump. But if you look at the full body of work, I mean, it is a body of accomplishment. And
and you've got somebody that will actually work with Republicans in the House and the Senate when the Senate will actually work, and he's pushing good policy and he wants it on his desk. I mean, you can't deny that the economy is growing at a rapid rate. You can't deny that the jobless rates are low, even though we've got a lot of able-bodied adults who are on the sidelines that need to get back into the workforce. But the president's pushing policy to do that with the work requirements that he allowed for Medicaid recipients, and that we're pushing in the Farm Bill. So, and the foreign policy things that he's done, who would have thought that would be possible? So
yeah, well, and I know the Korea thing's been put on hold, but I mean, I think that I think that is eventually going to happen. I really do. It's funny how the media and the Democrats are almost celebrating that the summit is potentially is postponed or is called off with North Korea, and it's like they're celebrating it. It's like, hang on, do you guys want this to work out, or are you just like the illegal immigration thing, Bruce? I mean, to my dismay, Trump gave the Democrats everything he wanted. He wanted border security, but was going to basically give amnesty to the DACA, and yet the Democrats said, wow, we'd rather them remain victims and you not get the credit so we can use them as political tools.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to what you're saying there, and even just look at where we are in relation to North Korea right now as opposed to where we were 6 months or 2 years ago.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Interesting situation going on over at Talk Business Report. Hang on, Joe. Let me send you this real quick so I can report on this that I just received. 1 second. Well, I can't find it. Oh, okay. Well, I'm misspelling things. Yeah, I'm just now seeing this, though. That's the issue here. It is a headline. No, it says 6 hours ago. Yeah, so it's not a few days old. There's another runoff we haven't talked about, and that's the good over up in District 8. This is Jake Files' old seat. You had Denny Altis running. You had Frank Glidewell running. And you had Matt Pitch running. And Frank Glidewell actually finished on top, but didn't have the didn't get the 51%. So it moves to a runoff between State Representative Matt Pitch and Frank Glidewell for the who's going to fill this District 8 seat up in Fort Smith. A couple of days ago, we found out that Governor Asa Hutchinson decided to endorse Representative Matt Pitch. And now we find out that Denny Altis is endorsing Glidewell in the Senate District runoff against Representative Matt Pitch. This is very interesting stuff here. Talk Business reporting that there's a June 19th runoff set for Glidewell and Representative Pitch to go head-to-head. Glidewell and Pitch finished first and second, respectively. Glidewell also defeated Altis 65 to 34% in the special election for the Senate seat. Pitch is a sitting legislator, was not allowed by state law to run in the special election. Glidewell faces Libertarian candidate Whitfield Hyman in the August 14th general election for the special election. A three-way race for the general election and the special election were the result of Senator Jake Files resigning because he pled guilty. This is what Glidewell said as he welcomes the support of Denny Altis and his voters. This is specifically should be of note to our listeners who are listening on the Marshall KFPW out of Fort Smith. Those of you listening on 1230 AM or 96.7 FM out of Fort Smith, this concerns you. Glidewell says, quote, I was delighted to learn that former Senator Altis has endorsed me for the runoff election. I have ran a campaign based on conservative values and not being beholden to special interests. Glidewell noted in a statement, as I stated in my comments when the results were announced on election night, Denny is a friend and a fellow conservative. We might not have agreed on every issue, but we are aligned in our pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-business voting records. Mr. Altis stood strong against pressure to vote for higher taxes, and I respect that greatly. I would welcome the vote of Mr. Altis' supporters for the runoff election to ensure that Sebastian County has a pro-business conservative vote in the state Senate. You contrast that with Matt Pitch has received the endorsement of Asa Hutchinson. So we'll see what happens. But again, that is what did I say? It's June 19th. So June 19th, people of District 8 have to go to the polls again and decide. And we'll be following that for our listeners in that area. The telephone number, folks, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. On this Tuesday after Memorial Day, I hope everybody had a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. It was really nice yesterday, and I hope it was good for you. I did probably I think I grilled out every single day. I was telling you at the beginning of the show. On Sunday I did ribs. Yesterday we did some venison burgers. You know what I did with the burgers, Joe? Well, I do the venison, the deer burgers are some of my favorite. I love deer burgers. I think I like them more than I like the other, just regular beef. Although I'm thinking about getting a cow. I'm thinking about trying to find somebody to buy like a half a cow with. I'm trying to source my food. I'm really trying to figure out where it's all coming from recently. So that's just my own person. But anyway. So got these deer burgers, but the biggest part of the deer burger meal actually wasn't the meat; it was the buns. Because I'm not a baker. I'm not really a baker at all. I'm a barbecue person. That's what I do. But I told my wife, I said, I want to try to make my own hamburger buns. I said, I'm not going to the store. I'm going to make this. We've got flour, we've got eggs, we've got yeast. We can do this. And so she said, okay. So she let me do it because baking is her thing. She let me actually do the mixer and the whole 9 yards. Anyway, they turned out really good. I mean, I was surprised. And so we had homemade buns as well as deer burgers. They're really good, or the deer. Anyway, 870-275-9799. Give me a text message. Give me a phone call if you'd like. Gary on Facebook riding straight off my farm. I guess what you're talking about is that's where all your food comes from, and that's good. That's good. I see Jan Morgan is listening. She's saying that deer makes great tacos and spaghetti as well. A lot of people just get, yeah, it is good. A lot of people take their, a lot of people like to get their entire, when they kill a deer, they like to get it all ground because they feel like it's more versatile, just to get the whole. That's not me though. I try to say, listen, I want as many steaks as we can get, and I like to keep the tenderloins whole. And then you just, then grind the rest. And it's still just an enormous amount of meat. But anyway. Okay, let's go and let's kind of review here. Well, did you see this? Before we do, I'm just going to briefly mention this. It is in the news because you do have public figures and stuff like that. The Gazette reporting that Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson's son was arrested early Monday on a driving while intoxicated charge. Records show William Asa Hutchinson III, 42, was booked into the Washington County Jail shortly after 3 a.m. Monday. The online booking report says he faces multiple charges, including DWI, speeding, and not submitting to a test that could determine his blood alcohol content. He was arrested by Arkansas State Police Trooper based in Springdale. Hutchinson was then released less than 2 hours later on $1,626 bond. Jail records show. So anyway, yeah, that happened. And there's been some other issues here. I mean, listen, the only reason this would be of interest is just I'm less interested in Asa Hutchinson III. I'm less interested in his DWI or DUI or whatever they call it these days. More interested actually in his marijuana future and working with law firms that are trying to. I think felt like that's really actually the more interesting story here. As a matter of fact, that's the only reason I wanted to bring it up in comparison with this judge over in Washington County that is now saying that the quorum court, we mentioned this briefly last hour, that the quorum court approval of is not needed. To grow marijuana. Growing marijuana falls under agricultural use, according to Judge Doug Martin. This is the same judge that didn't recuse himself when he pulled the Courtney Goodson ads. I know it's all complicated, but isn't it one complex web that we weave? So Judge Doug Martin did not recuse himself when he said that the ads, gave an order saying that the ads of Courtney Goodson, or the Judicial Crisis Network ads critical of Courtney Goodson had to be pulled. We found out later that his wife works for Courtney Goodson's husband. Didn't recuse himself before the fact, and the ads got pulled off the Northwest Arkansas market. Anyway, this same judge is now saying that the Washington County Quorum Court, that you don't need their approval. Native Flower doesn't need their approval to grow marijuana in a rural part of Washington County. And here's the thing about this article that we didn't get to last hour that really sticks out at me. Martin's ruling against the county means Native Flower won't need a permit to farm marijuana. Justices of the peace must tighten the language in the county's land use ordinance if they want marijuana cultivation to require a waiver. That would require future marijuana cultivation facilities to go through a permit process. Justice of the Peace Bill Ussery, a Republican representing northeastern Springdale, said the Ordinance Review Committee plans to review the issue soon. Ussery is chairman of the committee. Native Flower won't start growing marijuana anytime soon. Arkansas voters, we voted to legalize. They had, hang on a second. I read something in here about pharmacy. Yeah, here we go. So former planning director Jim Kimbrough said earlier this year the facility didn't fit into agricultural zoning and was treated like a pharmacy. Lester argued in court filings that the county has the right to regulate the facility and treated the project like a licensed retail pharmacy. Now, here's what's interesting. I think maybe, I don't know if you can treat anything marijuana like a pharmacy, because I know the federal government doesn't. Now, granted, I know this whole thing is taken outside of the context of the feds having any say at all, because technically, when we voted to legalize marijuana or medical marijuana, we voted to violate federal law, which I actually think is a good thing, not necessarily the marijuana aspect of it, because I thought it was all a ruse to make people rich, instead of just making it a very simple decision about, is it legal to grow a plant in the ground and do what you want to with it. That's a much straightforward vote where people aren't going to make money off of it. Of course, this whole thing was about getting rich and regulating it, okay, and not actually, but that's a whole other thing. But one of the reasons people argue, why can't you get medical marijuana at a pharmacy? Well, the reason is because the federal government classifies marijuana as, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's a type of classification that says, you know, that a pharmacy can't have it in, and they can't distribute it at all. See, a lot of people would be way more comfortable with medical marijuana if you actually had to get a prescription and you went to a pharmacy instead of. There's a reason they do the dispensaries, because pharmacies can't violate these federal regulations because the penalties are just way too severe. So while the state is violating federal law, these pharmacies dare not violate federal law, and that's why they're never going to be used until the federal government reclassifies what cannabis is under their whatever their little arbitrary thing is. Scale, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. So I thought it was interesting that they were arguing that they're treating it like a licensed retail pharmacy. That is interesting, but I can also see how that wouldn't stand up, because logically, marijuana and pharmacy is not at all what it's. That's not. They're not. They're two separate things. And if it wasn't, then pharmacies would be handling medical marijuana, and they can't. They simply can't. Kind of recapping what we talked about on the program today. War Memorial Stadium, $17 million for renovations. Is it a Trojan horse? Pun intended. Is it really a Trojan horse? Are they putting a carrot of potentially having the Razorbacks play, if they can make the renovations by 2019, up to $17 million, for the Razorbacks to play in Little Rock every other year, one game every other year, for a couple of years? Is it really a carrot to give UALR a football program in a stadium that's, I don't know, got bleachers that have, surface area for butts that are for normal human butts, and not, I'm telling you, you ever sit in those seats? It's really frustrating. It's like, come on. I mean, what is this? Was this made? You ever see the statues? Not the statues, but you ever see knights' armor assembled? Not for like actual knights' armor assembled from medieval times, okay? And these guys are super short. Back then, they were so much bigger than they are now. I don't know if it's the antibiotics and the chicken or the steroids or whatever. I have no idea. But that's what War Memorial was built for. Those people, for medieval knights, because that's the size of that these people were, to be able to fit with your little number. Like, okay, my butt goes right on this number here in War Memorial Stadium, and it's like, I don't know how. So, yeah, of course, if you're going to continue to watch games there and enjoy yourself. But should we spend $17 million? The answer is no. Now, here's the thing. The paper said that the Razorbacks would not play unless these renovations were complete. And the paper said, well, it could cost anywhere between $4 million to $10 million to $17 million. I'm like, wow, okay, all right. Who does that? You say between 4 to 17. You don't go from 4 to 10. So here's the thing: what if they only do $4 million worth of renovations? They do $4 million. They do $4 million worth of renovations, and then the Razorbacks say, you didn't do the $17 million, so we're not coming, but UALR now can launch a football program with a stadium that's been renovated for them. I don't know. Is it a Trojan horse? Pun intended. Is it really just saying, hey, Razorbacks are going to come here and you're going to love it. We're going to spend taxpayer money on it and yada, yada, yada. We'll have the UALR will have a football program, which, by the way, that is insane. Am I the only one that thinks it's ridiculous? It's a ridiculous waste of money for UALR to start a football program. I would say that me and John Brumman agree on at least this. His op-ed was kind of funny, where he talks about how this isn't going to. He says, I fail to see how UALR's losing to Delta State by 53-6 in War Memorial in front of 700 fans would lift Little Rock. It's weird, right? It doesn't make any sense. As fiscal conservatives, why would we support doing this? Why would we support continuing to subsidize War Memorial Stadium or start a football program, which suck money? I mean, it takes a lot of money to keep football programs afloat. We've got to take a break. Don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works Obamacare private option, has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are 2 matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Bill on Facebook writes that it angers him. It angers him how the state can spend money on a sports program and not its citizens. Bill, I think you lack a little perspective, and I agree with you, Bill. I agree with you, Bill. It is for the citizens. Are you familiar with the term bread and circuses? Bread and circuses. This is what the emperors would do in ancient Rome to keep the people happy. As a matter of fact, back towards the fall of Rome, when it was kind of on its last leg, you know, if as a Roman citizen you got a lot of good stuff, and they ended up substituting your food for wine at some point because the wine was going to keep them as sheep just a little bit longer. And look, I enjoy sports, and I enjoy Arkansas collegiate athletics. But to assume that it's you say, well, spending money and it's not on the citizens. Well, it is on the citizens, but you do have people who take these games extremely seriously and are more worried about a record of a sporting team than they are who's in elected office. They're more worried about a particular team winning and letting that determine whether or not they have a good day or a bad day than they are maintaining a free society, a limited government, and things like that. It's because the benefits of our freedom are not intuitive. It's not natural to recognize the benefits of our freedom. You don't really understand the benefits of it until you lose it. And so there's all kinds of wells out there. There's all kinds of wells to go to and drink from. There's all kinds of distractions. You have we'll look at voter turnout in Arkansas as key. I mean, there are more people who are interested in just really trivial things than they are interested in the direction that the state of Arkansas goes. They don't really. I don't think they really thought that if one person won or the other person won, that their life would drastically change. And I don't think they realized the avoidance of pain. You know why people got engaged? The people act based on the avoidance of pain. You know why Donald Trump won Arkansas? Because everybody knew that if Hillary Clinton won, there was going to be pain. There's going to be pain. Real world consequences, that their lives would be worse off if she had won. And that's why people got out and voted for Trump in Arkansas and across the country, because the contrast was clear. And here in Arkansas, people say, the low voter turnout that people have spoken. I think the special interests have spoken. I think Asa Hutchinson had $4 million. I think Jan Morgan had $130,000. And he refused to debate her. And that's why. I think he refused to debate her because he's like, hey, I got $4 million here. I don't need to debate anybody. And that was his strategy. And that kept Jan Morgan's message from getting out about Governor Hutchinson's record as running as a conservative versus what he's actually done, in government. So I find that interesting. But to your point, Bill, Russell Crowe, Bill writes Russell Crowe. Gladiator, right? Yeah, bread and circuses, or the gladiator competition. I mean, what is football if it's not modern day gladiator competition? If that's exactly what it is today. And there's a lot of people and this is a sad thing. I used to be very similar like this. That Medicaid and football, baby. That's us. Joe says instead of bread and circuses, it's Medicaid and football. I like that, Joe. That's good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to be back here tomorrow, and it's weird to say this, but tomorrow's not Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, at 6 a.m. Conduit News Radio is available for free if you missed the episodes or any episodes over at conduitnews.com, or go to facebook.com/Conduit News. Get the show there. Give us a like. Make sure you turn on notifications, and go to YouTube so that we can be discriminated against. Go to YouTube and like us, or subscribe to us, and click notifications as well to get our smaller videos on YouTube. It's Conduit News. Arkansas, be safe.